Go for it. Okay. I don't normally give sermons, and so I'm not going to give a sermon. It's just I've been thinking through a lot of stuff, and over the last year about pain, and in the last year I've taken more painkillers in the last year than I've taken in the whole of the rest of my life put together, basically, and I've been thinking a lot about it, about how we're called not just for faith for healing, but faith to hurt properly. There's pain is something that isn't just for us to avoid, but that's something that is included in God's plans for us. Now, as this is not a proper sermon, and more something I'm trying to get hold of. I'd like to have some involvement and some feedback, and if anyone has anything to say, just say, "Hold on, Steve, let me speak." And if anyone has a question, just say, "Hold on, Steve, I've got a question." Or if anyone has any difficulty with what I'm saying, hold on, go over that again, or whatever. So I just want to give you a chance to practice now, just saying, "Hold on, Steve." Okay? Because this might be a bit disorganized, but I want you to get a hold of something that will change the way you think about pain. Okay? So everyone say, "Hold on, Steve." Hold on, Steve. Great. Okay. Now, I want to start at the beginning. One of the things about pain and the way we look at it is that it's one of those things that was an add-on. It wasn't the way God initially thought about it, and whoops, we've got pain in the end. And I really don't think it's like that, because in the context of God loving us, God creating a universe, there's something in God that wouldn't do something that cost him nothing. That the very nature of love is that to give love properly, it has to cost the giver. And when God created, it cost him to create. And he created a universe that his ultimate purpose was for Jesus to come and die for us and express his love in that way. That the very nature of love necessitates paying a cost to show that you love someone. If it doesn't cost you, if it's not something that if it just doesn't cost you anything, then the value of it isn't shown. It's not given. And in Genesis, the first time that pain's mentioned, it's when God's talking to the woman, and he says, "You will have an increased pain in childbearing." Now, you can't increase something that isn't there. So nothing times anything is still nothing. That even before the fall, childbirth would have still hurt a bit. Sorry, Mel. But as a result of the fall, there was an increase of that. So there's a right way to hurt, and then there's increase of pain that comes because of our being out of relationship with God, or because of curse, because of sin. So pain isn't all bad, okay? There's part of it that is necessary for us to experience love fully and is good. but it's not permanent. That's the other thing about it. It's that in that passage we read about first comes the natural and then the supernatural body, that it has its time, and it's for here. And what I want us to do is wrestle on getting our perspectives on pain to the place where we hold on to, where we get a hold of everything that God has for us, and live in that better in the context of what He's called us to do. I'd like to start off with looking at some of the wrong responses to pain. Sorry. I'd like to start looking at some of the wrong responses we have to pain and then deal with those. So if people want to suggest what are some of the wrong ways that we can respond to pain, and then, pardon? Afraid of it. Yes? It's a good one. Any others? Ignore it, that's another good one. Yes? Pardon? Complain, yes? Any others? Self-pity, that's another good one. Yes? I should write these down, there's some I haven't got. What was it? Fear?
Fear, ignoring it, complaining about it, self-pity. Oh, and kicking the cat.
Kicking the cat, yes. Anger, yes. I got that one.
Condemnation. I deserve this.
Yes, got that one too.
Speaking to for the individual or for if something else is happening, your response to that.
Yes, that can be, we can have a right response to that and a wrong response. Some of these include that, like if someone else is hurting, ignoring it, that's a wrong response. So it includes both. Blaming, yeah. Okay. I start with condemnation. One of the things that we are free from, or we should be free from as Christians, is condemnation. And there's a wrong perspective on pain that when we hurt, we say it's all our fault. Now, there's some unchangeable facts about God's heart towards us, and they are that He loves us, and all His intentions towards us are good. Everything that He does for us is for our good. And once we become a Christian, we know that we've been taken out of the situation where Jesus has taken all our punishment for sin, and what we've got now is not about punishment, but it's about God making us more like Jesus. And one of the things that helped me deal with or understand how condemnation isn't appropriate is that in Hebrews 12 it talks about God disciplining us as sons. Now, the fact that He's disciplining us as sons is exactly the same way as God treated Jesus. Okay? God taught Jesus obedience through His suffering. He perfected Him through suffering. And if God's treatment of Jesus included suffering and pain, there was no basis that you could say that Jesus did something wrong and therefore God was punishing Him. Because God treated Jesus that way, that when we enter into suffering in the context of being God's children, it's a recognition of our sonship, that God is creating us to be more like Jesus. Okay. Kicking the cat. Yeah. Looking for spiritual. No, but it's part of our response to it. Last week, in my office, I've got a fridge, and there's a shelf that comes out over it. And I went down to get something out of the fridge and stood up and got the corner of it right in my head. Now, I didn't suddenly think, God just hit me with a big shelf. But I was suddenly made aware of attitudes inside me that God was immediately there to help me become more like Jesus with. That how we see pain, the pain is going to happen, and how we need to see it is an opportunity for spiritual growth. It is an opportunity for me to become more like Jesus. It's also an opportunity when it happens in the body for us to realize more how we're connected. That it's not punishment. It's an opportunity for more life to flow. I really learned this when we were praying for Dial. In a big way, I think we learned more about loving one another and being connected to one another through that than hundreds of teaching courses could have done. In the Corinthian church, if you look at 1 Corinthians 11, verse 30. Verse 29 says, "For anyone who eats and drinks without recognizing the body of the Lord eats and drinks judgment on himself. That is why many among you are weak and sick, and a number of you have fallen asleep." Now, going back to the condemnation thing, this judgment is not punishment. This is not punishment. This is talking about God desires to make us perfect, and therefore, in the context of that, people being sick and falling asleep is ultimately for our good. But it has come because people didn't realize they were connected to one another. Part of the problem with the church is that it's numb to pain that other parts of the body are feeling. And that when pain, sickness comes, we should see it as an opportunity to know the connection in the body. That that is part of what we're called to. It's part of what we as Christians are supposed to enter into, not avoid. It's part of what Jesus bought for us is relationship with one another. And part of that, learning to love one another, is about entering into the cost of loving someone. And part of the cost of loving someone is hurting when they hurt. And when we hurt as when other people in the body hurt, we need to learn to get to the place where we're hurting more with them rather than being numb from that pain. That part of properly is about recognizing our connection. Paul goes on in 1 Corinthians, I think this is 12:26. It says, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. That the suffering comes not because it's necessarily sent by God, but when it comes how we respond to it. There's more opportunity for growth and for realizing the body in that than being content and happy. Part of the biggest problem with the church in the West is that we're too content, we're too happy. And that people who pay the cost for their faith more know its value much more. I mean, Jesus said that who will love me more, someone who's forgiven more, forgiven less. The more we know what we've been given, the more we know the value of what we've got, the more good we realize it is. And part of how we deal with pain is about using that as an opportunity to recognize how much greater worth what we've been given is. Paul says about all these brief momentary sufferings, they're not worth comparing with the glory beyond. And he was shipwrecked, stoned nearly to death. But through that, the context that he had for understanding that was, it's worth it. It's more than worth it. The value of God's love for me and the fact that he loves other people. He even got to the point where when he was suffering for other people, he was rejoicing. It's mentioned in the passage we had as our reading. If it's just in this life, we might as well eat, drink, and be merry because we die tomorrow. But it's worth it. It's worth the suffering because we're going to be raised from the dead, because of the incredible value of what God's going to give us. And God is giving us more and more because of his resurrection life that we have. The fact that he faced wild beasts in Ephesus is worth it. Colossians 1:24. It says, now I rejoice in what was suffered for you, and I fill up in my flesh what is lacking in regard to Christ's afflictions, for the sake of his body, which is the church. I mean, to my mind, that verse is mind-blowing. You read it once and you think, that can't be right. And then you read it again, and it says, well, it says. What we're called into, I mean, the way I read this is Jesus' love for Mel, for Karen, isn't enough on its own. There's something lacking. And there's a requirement of us, the body, to love these people and to suffer for them. To love each other and suffer for them. That we're called to. It's not just enough that Jesus loves the world. If his church doesn't, is it that those people are missing out. If we're not entering in fully, if we're holding back from this, then there's something lacking in it, and it's in our power to give. I mean, I was really challenged when Phil was preaching and mentioned about Jackie Pullinger, that in going into the walled city, the people came to her after 4 years and said, we know what you're saying is true, basically now. We know that God loves us because you stayed here. Other people didn't. That she was prepared to take the cost. That Jesus just loving those people without someone to go and bring it to them wouldn't have changed their lives. Okay, I've got on way ahead of myself, and want to go back to dealing with anger. How long have I got, or am I? Okay. Yep. A response to pain as anger is very easy, and another, and part of that is even if you hurt yourself, it's sort of, you start saying "stupid me" or whatever, and it's almost the bigger when you hurt yourself and it's your own fault. Because if someone else hurts you, you know you're not supposed to be angry at them, and you can keep it in, and as long as you don't say anything and it doesn't leak too much, you can kind of get away with it. But the reality is that what we do and what we say comes from the overflow of the heart, and what God's after is a heart that responds in the right way. And how our heart responds to pain, I think, is most clearly revealed actually when we hurt ourselves, because we don't have all those social barriers or whatever to kind of hold in, because you tell yourself exactly what you think of yourself. When you stub your toe or when you knock your head, that you've got no qualms about sort of social barriers or holding anything back. And I think it's actually very revealing. And what Jesus calls us to is to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. And that's very difficult if every time we stub our toe, we go, "Are you stupid? What?" Or every time, like this morning when I forgot my bus pass, and I was halfway to the station, and I said, "Oh, I'm preaching this morning." What? Yes. I was actually going to be something like 20 minutes early, and then had to go back for my bus pass, and you think, "Oh no." But anyway, that's when we do things to ourselves that put ourselves out, we need to be able to see that is an opportunity that we can take hold of to deal with issues in our heart to make us more like Jesus. It's got some very strong words about anger in the scriptures. This is in, I think it's Matthew 5. This is under murder. You've heard it said to people long ago, "Do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment." Again, anyone who says to his brother, "Raka," a term of contempt, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. The reality is people are going to do things that are going to hurt us. And even more so, we're going to do silly things that hurt us as well. I think the person that has hurt me most in my life is me, for sure. And part of the challenge is, if I really have laid down my life and that is totally surrendered to God, if all things really work together for my good, if in the context of His infinite love for me, His dying for me, any pain that I go through isn't worth comparing with the goodness of what He's given me. It's not that pain doesn't matter, but that any amount of pain is worth, if I can use it, I'm going to get more of what Jesus has for me. Okay. Self-pity. What are we really saying if we're self-pitying? Yeah, but what does that mean? I mean, what kind of things do you say if you're self-pitying?
One of the things is nobody does.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So you want, yeah. It's kind of the idea that I don't deserve this. That really the universe is all wrong here. The universe should change itself so that I don't hurt anymore. In its core, it really is self at the center, isn't it? It's when we haven't fully laid that down, said that basically the only thing that matters is Jesus and His love for me. That's what's true. I mean, it can even come across like we're saying to Jesus, what you did for, that's very nice, but it's like, it's not enough. It's like, it's focusing on ourselves at the loss of focusing on the goodness of God and the gifts. And the way around self-pity isn't to ignore pain, because pain is very real and pain has value, but it's to get hold of always the goodness of God towards us. That's what the reality is, that okay.
I think many times when things occur in is regardless of what it be, it's physical pain or emotional pain, is the feeling sometimes that God has forsaken us.
Right.
When in reality,
He hasn't.
that means forsaken God.
Right.
We've turned away from Him, and He turned away from us.
Yeah. That's the one thing that Jesus faced for us that we will never have to do, that He was forsaken so that we don't have to.
And I think that's probably the most joyous and the most anguishing reality. When you wake up and say, wait a minute, God's there.
Yeah.
I'm not the one speaking to Him.
Yeah.
He's been speaking to me, but I'm not listening. So that's one of the major things, is realizing you've been the one who's done the forsaking and not know. And that helps you deal with it a lot.
Yep, that's good. It's basically the answer to self-pity is to believe in the goodness of God. Absolutely. I want to talk briefly about having a right response to pain, because we know the gospel isn't about come to Jesus and it'll be easy, or come to Jesus and he'll make everything better and you won't have to look at the painful issues. It's come to Jesus and you'll have resurrection life, yes, but you have to die to get into it. Count the cost. But it's also not a message of pain is good to live in. Pain is still something that we're to fight against, we're supposed to respond to it. We're not supposed to ignore it. Anyone want to suggest right responses to pain? What we should do that is good in response to pain? Express it. Yep. Pray. Yes. Pardon? Why should you have to have pain? I think that the pain is in existence because part of the nature of love is that love, to be given and to be shown that it has value, has to cost someone. If everything that you could do for someone else didn't cost you anything, if it was easy, if there was no cost to it, then it wouldn't be love. So for love to exist properly, pain has to be in existence. And the reality is, God's created a universe, and it hurt him because he loved us. That our pain, because he loves us, it hurts him. And it hurts him even more than it hurts us. Because, pardon? Absolutely. The ultimate expression of God's love for us hurt him. That he said, I love you this much, so much, and more than this, I'm prepared to give up my infinity, to give up everything, and to hurt and be killed for you because I love you. And the understanding of why pain exists, when we compare it to the value of love, that's how we understand it. I mean, a lot of people bring up the question, if there's pain, then God can't exist. And that's really coming from the basis of wanting to ignore pain and wanting to ignore people that are hurting. But once you enter into the reality of loving people and hurt with them, and the more and more people you enter into loving people, the more and more you see the value of what it's worth to hurt for someone. And in the context of love, pain is worth it. So it's not that pain is a good thing in itself, but it's worth the cost to find real love, to find true love. And part of what we're called to as a church is that our message isn't just about words and to give people an answer to the problem of pain, but we've got to show it's true by loving people to our own hurt. We've got to start getting out there and saying, I want to learn how much God loves you. He loves you enough to die for you, to give up everything for you. And what I want to grow into is learning more about how I can do that. And to show that to people in our lives. But pain, it's not supposed to just accept it, even though it shows us the value of love and how good God is. I mean, even Jesus coming to the cross, he prayed 3 times and said, if I don't have to go through this, Lord, take the cup away. But in the end, he got to the position of saying, not what I want, but what you want, God, that this is difficult, and I really don't, I mean, it was really difficult, but love is better. But it wasn't wrong for Jesus to say, if it's possible, don't let this hurt so much. Paul talks about a thorn in his flesh that he wrestled with. He asked God to take it away 3 times. It was kind of like Paul's healing lots of people, and then he's got this own problem. It was maybe a problem with his eyes that, and he goes to God and says, God, will you heal me? And God says, no, my grace is sufficient for you. And it's like, huh, what? And he goes again and says, God, heal me. And he gets the same response. And his attitude was to expect healing every time, so much so that God had to say, this bit is going to stay with you. Not everything we're going to enter into until the bodily resurrection. But we need to learn something about not lying down under pain and ignoring it, or saying it doesn't matter, I'm not worth healing, or whatever, because Jesus did die for our healing. He died for our resurrection. And that, like, when he came up against Lazarus's tomb, he wept. There was, he'd stayed back in order to let Lazarus die. But when he saw death there face to face, there was something, this is not good. We're called to pray for healing. We're called to see healing. We're called to alleviate pain. We're called to fight against it. In the context of, this is the opportunity to show God's power, God's reality, God's love. This is how we outwork the goodness of God in this situation. That it's not about lying down under something. So, we're called into a battle, and when we're called into a battle for something, we shouldn't be surprised if our enemy starts fighting back. And with pain and sickness, part of our determination has to be, we're going to set our hearts on going for loving people, on going for their healing, on their good, always. And ultimately with hope that is going to be fulfilled in the resurrection, but for as much of that now as possible. That, so it may be that if someone is sick and hurting, we're called to go and pray for them. If they don't get healed, or even if their pain gets worse, that situation is better than trying to ignore the pain and make it go away. We're called primarily to love one another, and in that context, pain is worth it. So our goal is to have faith to hurt properly, to bring faith out, or to bring pain out of self-pity, out of anger, out of condemnation, out of fear, or out of just ignoring it, into it's worth it. We're in relationship. God is good. His power is sufficient. His grace is more abounding. That pain, there is faith to deal with pain in that situation. We're not called to ignore it, to be out of relationship, whatever. And part of getting into that place is about going for healing all the time. The direction of our hearts is to deal with pain wherever it comes up. Is we're going to go for healing. We're going to fight for healing for each other. We're not going to be disappointed. We're going to pray for the best for one another. We're going to keep on going, and we're going to fight until we see how we can get more faith for healing, how we can get more faith for living in pain, but more faith for the resurrection, more faith to see God's life in us. That we need to get out of seeing pain as something we shouldn't have to deal with, to pain is an opportunity for knowing the goodness of God and for loving people, for experiencing more of His power, for more of His life at work in us. Okay, I was kind of all over the place, and I've got loads of stuff I didn't say that I had down, but yep, I hope you've got something. Questions are good. Okay.
So 2 minutes of questions.
Just 2 minutes?
Yeah, 2 minutes.
Questions, how many minutes and answers?
Wait.
You can come back and do part two.
Or just come
Questions?
Want some more?
do you want to do a follow-up on another occasion? That'd be useful.
I don't really want to leave questions unanswered if I've got something I can give.
Right.
So, can we do coffee and do questions as well?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Yes, if you're willing to be around and can sort of
for as long as it takes,
you and take some specific questions to you, because I think this could take on a long time, couldn't it? And then we'll see at the end of that whether it's worth doing a follow-up session,
okay,
on the front, as it were, in a couple of weeks' time. I think John's on next week.
Yeah.
Don't turn that off. Sorry, you're being recorded.
Okay.
Because I'm not the only stupid idiot.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
If I
Yeah.
may, with things that hurt me, I'm a chronic person for saying, well, Susan doesn't matter and we'll ignore that and just get on with serving people. Right? Are you saying that's wrong?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's right. So I feel how I feel, and my efficiency goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And you've experienced that yourself because you've been so ill that you couldn't talk coherently, let alone get your work done.
Yeah.
And then everybody else suffers because I'm incompetent and inefficient and I'm not doing my job properly and they have to cover for me.
Yes.
So I look at this and I say, right, ignore the pain, you've got a job to do, you've got to serve people. And then I'm wrong again. Sort that one.
Okay, but that is part of God's purpose working out and working, because you're not supposed to be independent. You're not supposed to be self-sufficient. You're not supposed to be able to get the job done efficiently on your own. You're supposed to need people. You're supposed to be supported by people. You're supposed to be connected. But like it says, when one part suffers, everyone suffers. That's good. That when that happens, it means the church, the body is working like it's supposed to work. When it doesn't happen, when people are independent, going in their own resources, not having any input from other people, not expending themselves for other people, it's not working then. The fact that we experience pain doesn't mean that something isn't working. In fact, if I chopped off my finger and didn't feel pain, something would seriously be wrong with my body. The fact that we experience pain doesn't mean that the pain is wrong to experience. It means it's there for a purpose. It's there to tell me that my finger's just not connected anymore or whatever. And as a body, we're called to warfare. And in that context, there will be pain. That is part of what we're called to. And that is part of what there is resource in the church, the body, to deal with. That's part of how we're going to learn these vast riches that Christ has given us.
Right. What we'll do, I think, is let's try and get the microphone out.
What I suggest we do is just to draw the threads together for now, because I know that some people may have to slip away or whatever. So we'll kind of draw the meeting to a close, but obviously Steve will still be around if you want to particularly follow up certain things with Steve that he's been talking about. Steve's available and we'll take some of those things. And then we'll have a chat. I'll chat with Steve afterwards and we'll see whether there might be a case for doing a sort of follow-up session in a week or two's time. So I hope that will hopefully mean that we cover all that needs to be covered, but at the same time release people that need to be released. As Steve was talking, I just want to kind of draw one or two threads together. As Steve was talking about pain, he was also talking about, I guess, three areas I've sort of scribbled down, just trying to sort of get my head around it. One was pain in terms of problems, in terms of how we respond to it, and how not to respond to it. And I want you to not forget these, but just use these as a checklist and think, do you respond in any of these ways? I mean, I've been sort of just looking at myself. Let me just list them out for you again. God may want to sort of highlight some of these for you that he wants to change. Wrong responses to pain. Fear, ignoring it, self-pity, anger, condemnation, blame, over-spiritualizing, evasion and avoidance, complacency, or lying down under it, I think as Steve put it. That's one area of challenge. Pain, problems. Steve's also talked about pain and about perspective and pain and possibilities. Pain and perspective is about seeing pain in the context of the bigness of what God has given us in terms of his love and what God is going to give, the bigness of God's plans, the fullness of them, the victory, if you like, the way that life swallows up death and all those kind of things. So we need to come to pain seeing perspective, God's perspective. And we also need to see pain in the context of possibilities. That yes, we are, if you like, seeing to bring the life of God against pain when we encounter it, and yet recognizing that even pain God can use to change us more into his likeness, to bring us together. Steve was talking about how we as a church were brought together praying during Dial's illness and death. So there's the whole thing about the possibility for unity and oneness together, loving one another. And also the possibility in terms of the kingdom reaching out, being a people prepared to engage with the pain of the world and to experience pain as we love the world. There's a possibility there in pain that we need to not overlook by avoiding it, evading it, and all those kind of things. So we need to sort of challenge ourselves about the problems, to start seeing the perspectives and to open our eyes to the possibilities, if you like. That's, I think, what God wants to challenge us on. So I'm just going to just close in prayer, and then we'll just wind things up from there. Father, just thank you for all the provocation that Steve's brought to us this morning on an area that is, I guess, all of us have encountered in one form or another. Lord, I pray you'd help us to recognise and to bring before you those ways in which we've responded badly to pain. And Lord, I pray you instead give us a new vision, a new perspective. Help us to see the possibilities of the kingdom being outworked, of your purposes being outworked within us, between us, amongst us, from us, touching the world. So Lord, I pray that you would stir us up, that you would change our understanding in this whole area. And Lord, that you do that. Just renew our mind, Lord. Make it more like, bring it more into accordance with your thinking on this, Lord. Amen. Just finally, we've got a couple here who have visited